So my aim here today is for everyone in the audience to learn at least something new and for you to walk away with an action to put in place to hopefully assist the children in your lives to get off to a good start with their eating habits. So what are we going to cover? We're going to look at why good nutrition is important for toddlers, how our Aussie kids fare and what they're eating, what are some of the common challenges that parents are facing, and some practical tips about how you can overcome these. So, unlikely news to this audience here that a toddler is a child from the age of about 1 to 2.5. Now, even though we're focusing on this age group today, even if you have children of different ages, lots of the practical tips we're going to cover are going to be relevant to all children of all ages. The reason why we decide to focus on this area is because it seems to be a bit of a troublesome time for a lot of parents when they do experience some difficulties. So, why are the toddler years challenging? So it's a time of rapid growth and development. Toddlers are learning lots of new skills. They're gaining an understanding of concepts. They're beginning to make sense of current events and solving problems. And they're using their imagination and memory and, of course, doing lots of observing and imitating. They have a growing independence, and this can be seen whilst they're eating, playing, toilet training, and on some days they're going to want to do all these tasks by themselves, and other days they might need your help. They're also going to be able to learn to use the word no. They're starting to learn to take responsibility and that there can be consequences for their action, and they can struggle with parental discipline and sibling rivalry, and often they may misbehave if they feel frustrated, angry, upset, and they have no better way to express these feelings. So why is good nutrition important? Well, because of this rapid growth and development, children need to be eating a good, healthy, balanced diet to ensure they're getting the nutrients to support this. Both eating and food can provide both positive and negative learning experiences. And research has shown that poor nutrition in early years can increase the risk of developing health conditions such as diabetes, cardiovascular disease, asthma, and osteoarthritis. And this is a time when they're forming lifelong attitudes towards food and eating, so it's important for them to get off to a good start. So how do our Aussie kids fare? So the 2007 Australian National Children's Nutrition and Physical Activity showed that unfortunately our kids aren't eating enough fruit and vegetables. So the proportion of children eating the recommended serves declines with age. So we saw that the age group 4 to 8 year olds were achieving, about 60% of them were achieving their recommended intake, whereas 14 to 6 year olds, only 1% were achieving that recommended intake for fruit. Similar situation with vegetables, so about 20% of 4 to 8 year olds are achieving the recommended intake and 5% of 14 to 16 year olds. So areas that we do need to focus on. In terms of sugar, the total energy intake is recommended for sugar to be about 20%. Our kids are having too much sugar, with about 24% of their total energy intake coming from sugar. But the guidelines also really emphasise the importance of reducing added sugar. So less than 10% of their total sugar should come from this added sugar. And what I mean by that is all the sugars except for those ones that are naturally occurring in foods like your fruits and your dairy. In terms of salt, our children, on average, were exceeding the upper recommended limit for salt. So the best way to improve this is to increase their intake of fresh foods and reduce the reliance on processed and packaged foods. So there's a great tool you can use for label reading, as this can be really confusing and complicated, but Bupa, along with the St George Institute, have created an app called Food Switch. It's free to download and available on both Apple and Android. And what it does is it uses the camera function of your phone or your tablet and scans a barcode and then gives you really simple traffic light coding to get an idea of the salt, sugar and saturated fat content of that food, and then it also provides you with a healthier alternative of a very similar product. So great app for you to look into. I really recommend it. Now in terms of fat, our kids are on par in terms of the total recommendation of fat, which is to about 30% of their energy intake. However, it was saturated fat that we need to concentrate on, as they were including more of this than desirable. So they were getting about 14%, where it's recommended to be less than 10%. So when I talk about saturated fat, I mean those fats that come from predominantly the animal-based sources, and also two of your vegetable sources, palm and coconut, are predominantly that saturated fat. So another concerning result in the survey was it was shown that 1 in 6 Aussie kids are skipping breakfast. So we know breakfast is really important for kids in terms of their concentration levels, their performance, and to ensure that they have energy throughout the day so they can play and learn as toddlers need to. So what are some of the common challenges? So food allergies, it's estimated that they occur in around 1 in 20 children, the most common ones being eggs, cow's milk, peanuts and tree nuts. It appears that there is a rise in allergy incidents, and we're actually unsure at the moment as what's causing this rise. There are a few proposed explanations for this, one being the hygiene hypothesis, which states that children are now exposed to less infections and are less biodiverse microbes in their environment, and this may have a negative impact on their immune system and lead to an increased risk of developing allergies. There's also the debate about delayed versus early introduction of allergenic foods. It's thought that the new methods of food processing and that there's more food processing in our food supply could be having an impact. Also that the development of some allergies may be due to skin exposure, such as the nut-based moisturisers. But as I said, we still don't have a clear understanding of what is causing this, so further research is needed, which is underway. So what can you do? Well, according to sort of the experts in this area, so the 2012 Australian Infant Feeding Guidelines and the Australasian Society of Clinical Immunology and Allergy suggest that delaying the introduction of solids after 6 months can increase the risk of an allergy. So it's important to introduce solids around 4 to 6 months and not to delay this. Also, breastfeeding, if possible, until 6 months or later can be beneficial. And continuing to breastfeed when you do introduce solids. There's no benefit for mothers restricting their dietary intake while they're pregnant or breastfeeding, and this unnecessary restriction could actually have adverse effects on the growth of the baby. No evidence to support avoiding allergenic foods unless there's a known allergy for the mother or for the child, of course. And to avoid smoking while pregnant and avoid exposure to the child's in the home tobacco smoke. But if you do suspect an allergy, it's best to seek medical advice and to not delay this, because again, if you then delay the introduction of that food, you may increase the risk of an allergy. So now let's look at intolerances. So often allergies and intolerances are confused. The reason for this is they can have similar symptoms. However, they are very different. The main difference is an allergy involves a reaction from the immune system, whereas an intolerance doesn't. So I often do have parents that are concerned that their children are going to react to food additives and chemicals in our food. This can occur, but it is really rare, which is important to be aware of. So some of the additives in our food are natural, and examples of this is like salt, which is chemically known as sodium chloride, or amines, which are naturally found in foods like chocolate, dairy, fruits and vegetables, whereas others are artificial. Some examples of the artificial ones are a monosodium glutamate, or you guys may be more aware of as MSG, a flavour enhancer. When you read it on the label, it's number 621. Another example is artificial sweeteners like aspartame, which is 951 on the label. Now, when you're reading labels, just because you see a number there, it doesn't mean it's an artificial additive. Even your natural additives are given numbers. An example of this is vitamin C or ascorbic acid, which is given the number 300. So you can rest assured that all additives in the Australian food supply have undergone extensive testing to determine the safe levels for consumption, including the consumption by children. And this is governed by FSANZ, which is Food Standards Australia and New Zealand, so you can get more information from their website. But if you are worried, processed foods tend to have more additives and generally speaking are less healthy. So the best recipe for good health is to maximise the intake of fresh and whole foods. So fussy eating, no doubt there's a few of you in the audience that have experienced this firsthand, but caution over new foods is 100% normal. Even adults can experience caution over new foods. So think about if you've ever travelled and you've been offered a delicacy from another cuisine, you might have had a bit of caution or even fear before trying that. Similar to with children, except the eating experience is a constant learning experience, so lots of foods are new and foreign to them. It's estimated that 20 to 30% of children will have a fear of trying new foods. And this can lead parents to often give up introducing new foods, which can lead to a limited intake for that child later on. Another thing is taste aversion. So have you ever been sick with symptoms like nausea or vomiting or severe gut pains, and now you associate that feelings of being sick with the meal you had just prior, regardless of whether that meal was the cause of it or not? That's called a learned taste aversion, and that association with that food and that feeling of being sick can last for many, many years. So this can occur with children. So erratic eating. So children have a natural ability to eat a variety of food and know how much they need, but some days they're going to eat lots and other days they're not going to eat that much. So it's most practical for you to focus your attention on what your child's having over a whole week rather than what they're having from day to day, because that is going to fluctuate and that's perfectly normal. So unlike adults who have many influences on when we eat, things like the time of day it is, our stress levels, what's on our plate, children don't tend to have these influences. They also have a stronger internal sense of feelings of fullness, appetite and hunger, and therefore are more likely to stop eating when they feel full, not just when everything's gone from their plate. And children tend to have the ability to eat the right amount that they need to grow properly. So parents do often worry that their children will go hungry, and toddlers are looking for a sense of control. So again, this struggle between dependence and independence can come into play. And parents need to remember that the learning experience for eating is a slow process, and so to trust in them, even when it can be sometimes hard to watch on. The best thing you can do is to be their role model. This can lead to them learning healthy habits for life. So Ellen Satter is a dietitian and family therapist. She's a recognised authority on eating and feeding and the author of Division of Responsibility in Feeding. Now she's come up with a philosophy which clearly describes the role that children and parents play in the eating experience. So parents are responsible for what the child eats, the children are responsible for how much and whether they eat. So parents need to ensure they prepare healthy, nutritious foods, provide regular meals and snacks, make eating times pleasant, teach children about food and appropriate mealtime behaviour, be considerate of children's food inexperience without always catering to all their likes and dislikes, as that can lead to limited intake. So kids will eat better if supportive adults are in the situation who are friendly and companionable but not being managing. So children, they will eat. They'll usually eat the amount they need. They can learn to eat foods their parents do and behave appropriately at mealtimes. They're looking to feel in control and therefore will eat better if they have the choice to pick and choose how much and what they eat. And they also benefit from having the freedom to turn down food. So knowing they can taste something without having to finish it and having that out with food will encourage them to be more daring and try more of those new foods. So what can parents do to assist this process? So lead by example. So little brains are like sponges, soaking up information from the world around them, and they are constantly observing and learning. So ensure you eat your fruits and vegetables and let them see you enjoying them. So research shows that children who see people around them eating fruit and vegetables are more likely to eat fruit and vegetables themselves and have a general well-balanced diet. It's also important that the sharing and eating experience is important social interaction for children. So they're never too young to start. So even babies that aren't on solids yet can benefit from seeing that interaction the family has at meal times. Another good idea is to serve meals in a family or communal style where everyone's able to serve themselves. This will give children that opportunity to be able to select what they're having on their the dinner plate and how much they're having. So again, giving them that control, which can be really beneficial. And research shows that children who grow up regularly eating family meals at the dinner table have a better relationship with food, eat healthier, which includes an increased intake of fruit and vegetables and reduced intake of junk food, and have a reduced risk of developing eating disorders, substance abuse, anxiety and depression in the teenage years and beyond. So it is really important, those family meals at the dinner table. Also, removing distractions. So what I'm talking about here is turning off that TV, taking away the phones, taking away the tablets. This gives children the ability to focus all their attention on the eating experience and to learn. But it also means the parents' full attention is focused on that and encouraging and engaging the children in that eating experience. So beneficial for both parents and children to have no distractions. So as I keep reminding you, parents are the biggest influences on children's eating behaviour. So your words and actions can have positive or negative influences on children's eating behaviour well into the future. So the key is to encourage them without pressuring, restricting or forcing them. So it's important to avoid focusing your words on yourself and your feelings. So what I mean by this, instead of saying something like, eat your broccoli for me, or mummy spent a lot of time cooking this, please eat it. Say things like, aren't these carrots crunchy, or oranges are sweet and juicy. It gets the children to focus on the experience of eating rather than eating for your approval, which is really good for their relationship with food into the future. It's also important to think about your words. So avoid labelling foods as good and bad. And instead of calling things like your cakes and your biscuits naughty foods, refer to them as sometimes foods, and reinforce this by ensuring you only offer them occasionally, not every day. If you're offering them every day, the children are going to question whether they really are those sometimes foods. Now, it may be tempting to comfort a crying child with lollies, or to offer a child dessert if they finish everything on their plate. But it's important to think about what that could lead to. So let's look at offering dessert if you finish everything on the plate. On that one meal, you might get that child to eat more vegetables, but you're sending them a message that vegetables are horrible and something that requires an incentive to eat them, and that dessert is more desirable. So this could lead to overeating. In terms of comforting a child with lollies, this could lead to them comfort eating later in life. So instead of comfort them with food, comfort them with kind words, kisses and hugs. So routines. So routines are really important for children as it helps them feel secure and safe. So just like a good sleeping routine can help your child to sleep better, a good eating routine can help them to eat better as well. So keeping the kitchen closed between those meals and snack times can help reinforce this routine. Try to offer children meals or snacks every 2.5 to 3 hours. And remember that their stomach's the size of their little fist, so they're going to fill up really quickly, but also empty quickly. So regular meals that are varied foods and there's that balance there are going to provide them with the fuel they need to keep their energy levels going through the day. And also remember their appetites are going to fluctuate, so don't get stressed if they turn down a meal or a snack. They're probably just not feeling full at that time, and they will likely eat again later that day, or even the next day they're going to eat, sort of catch up. Also see snack time as a great opportunity to get more nutrients in. So again, instead of focusing on those sometimes foods, which we may sort of fall into the trap of offering at those snack times, focus on your core food group. So what I mean by that is your fruits, your vegetables, your dairy and your protein foods. And it's good to offer them a couple of alternatives, but don't become a short order cook. If a child knows that if they turn down dinner, you're always going to offer them their favourite Vegemite sandwich, what's the incentive to try new foods? So you need to remember that there's so much for children to learn, new types, taste, textures and sensations with food. So just because they reject something last week doesn't mean they're going to reject something this week. And it also takes a lot of time for children to trust new foods, and then even longer for them to like new foods. So research shows that it can take from 10 to 15 exposures of a new food to actually begin to trust it, and then another up to 15 exposures for them to like that new food. And that often parents give up around the 5 mark. So even if you think you do keep trying, perhaps even try that little bit more. 10 to 15 just for them to trust it, and another 15 to like it is a lot of exposures to that food, so don't give up too early. Another way to help increase their familiarity with food is visual exposure. So what I mean by this is picture books that include food in them, or giving them toy play models of fruits and vegetables. It's another way of getting them to be more familiar with those foods. Important to make it fun. So we eat with all our senses, so therefore it's really important to make food visually appealing. So think about different shapes you can cut foods into, and also creative and fun ways you can display food on their plate, so things like smiley faces. So you can get lots of really great ideas from online and magazines. So I encourage you to try new things there. Another good way is to give food creative names. So my favourite ones, broccoli, call them their little trees, and even let them plant them in that mashed potato. So allowing children to play with their food and make a mess, don't be stressed about that, is another way to get them really familiar with that food and learning new things about it. And last but not least, get them involved. So include them in all the different steps. So the food selection, the food preparation, the cooking. So think about the age-appropriate tasks for your little ones. So perhaps it's picking herbs in your garden, might be helping you with the shopping, mixing ingredients, tossing the salad, or assembling their own meals. Doesn't matter what it is, just include them in that process. It's really beneficial. So I hope I've achieved my aim today and you've all learned at least something new and you have a plan to put into action to go away that's hopefully going to assist to set up your little ones to eat well for life.